we tee up Alex Jones. Hey, brother.
How you doing? Good to be back with you.
Good to see you, my man. Yeah, look, we didn't get much yesterday really into what happened in Lexington this past weekend between the Gamecocks and the Wildcats. We did talk to Debbie Antonelli yesterday, and I asked her to give me her synopsis of Carolina's program this season thus far, especially compared to last year. She kind of avoided that and just went straight down the road of, if you want to win, look around, you need more money. We know that South Carolina needs a little bit more money, and certainly they are already putting plans in place to be able to get some of that and spend some of that. I thought, one of two things would happen this weekend. Kentucky was reeling. They had a couple tough losses, so they're going to come out and blow the doors off of South Carolina, or maybe they were going to still be kind of stuck in slow motion, and Carolina might have a fighting chance and be able to win their third consecutive over the Wildcats for just the second time ever. But it was the latter that happened. Kentucky, South Carolina hit them at the wrong time. Kentucky got South Carolina at the right time. That was a great bounce back for them, and quite frankly, it really wasn't much of a ball game.
Yeah, early on in the game, Kentucky kind of started off slow. Both teams really started off slow offensively. I think Kentucky missed one of their first 9, and they had some open looks, but, South Carolina, did let them get any second chance opportunities early on and kind of kept the game close for a while. But then, one of the stories of this season so far, we talk about turnovers a lot, but they've also had some scoring droughts in these games, and that was another key issue in this game against Kentucky. I mean, had a scoring drought where they didn't score for, I think it was 4 minutes and 36 seconds in that first half, and Kentucky went on a run, kind of created some separation. And right there at the end of the half, and I think South Carolina couldn't find the bottom of the net, and Kentucky went, I think it was maybe a 12-0 run or so, and really created separation. And those first half runs kind of allowed South Carolina to have a huge hole to dig itself out of in the second half, and got it down to 9 there in the second half. And then it just kind of snowballed away from a couple of turnovers, led to some points for Kentucky. And once you give that Kentucky team momentum, and they really get going, get on the fast break, they can be hard to stop. And you saw that, it started draining some threes, and the turnovers kind of added up a little bit. And then South Carolina offensively just struggled throughout the game, and Kentucky kind of took advantage of it.
Yeah, look, it's not like we haven't been concerned, Alex. We obviously have been concerned with this team. But beyond the concern of, winning games and stuff like that, I'm really more concerned of the towel. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have guys who are they're just done? I mean, I'm not. If we've learned anything about Lamont since he's been here at South Carolina, his teams don't quit. They don't quit. Even when they get blown out, they show up the next night and they play ball. But this is just a whole nother animal. Number one, they don't have the players. And number two, heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, human nature tells you that catches up to you in your mentality. I don't know. Where do you think they are?
Yeah, you haven't seen any of that, it seems like, here in these last stretch of games. Like, they're still playing hard, but I think you're right. You have to wonder just where the mentality is of this team, especially because you came off so many close losses to some of the top teams in the country. I mean, Auburn and Florida, you were right there. Florida had to beat you with a buzzer beater. You had Mississippi State in overtime. You just wonder how much that weighs on them. And then you go to Kentucky and have it close enough within reach, and then they kind of run away from you. So I think you have to wonder how the mentality of this team, but Lamont's kind of kept this group together through these struggles, and they continue to play hard. And so we'll see tomorrow night. I mean, or Wednesday night, you got Ole Miss coming to town, who is coming off a pretty incredible comeback against LSU this weekend. Yeah. And I mean, they're a solid team. They've taken a huge step. So I mean, South Carolina just needs to keep fighting. I think you're going to see that. It's just we've talked about the struggles of this team and what's holding them back, and that's just continued to happening.
It's hard too. Well, for fans, like, you're kind of you're kind of stuck in the middle of the old way versus the new way. Historically, when you have a season like this, you think, all right, well, we've got to rebuild, and we're 2, 3, 4 years away, but it's gradual. Well, obviously that's not the case anymore. I mean, as I pointed out, Debbie was like, you get in the portal, you go spend a bunch of money, you're better next year. It's like it's like being in the pros. but like, so it's hard to kind of grasp that concept when you're getting beat every time you step on the floor. I get it. It does beg the question, you know, I think I know about where they were financially based on what I've been told. I got a pretty good source on that, so I don't have any reason to not believe them. But that just continues to go up. And then, of course, you got coming July 1, you've got new revenue distribution and all this stuff coming. It's kind of a bad year to have a bad year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what South Carolina brought in from the transfer portal this past cycle, and Nick Pringle has had his moments and has played pretty well. I think maybe maybe their expectations could have been a little bit, or maybe expectations are high right now, and he's had his moments. And I mean, Jamari Thomas, who was injured for a little while, he showed some promise here lately and has kind of kept South Carolina in some of these games the way he's played. But without a doubt, South Carolina's going to have to hit the portal this cycle with what they're losing, just from a senior standpoint. And then, I think, excuse me, I think, it's a key cycle for South Carolina because it's going to be a key season for Lamont Paris. And, they just, they need to go hit that portal hard because there's keys, not only with some of their returners ahead, but there's some key pieces that they really just need to hit on in this portal cycle.
Yeah, starting with guard play. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're going to lose Colin Murray Boyles. I mean, there's the argument is there that he's not ready for the NBA, and maybe he's not. But as your partner Matt Anderson has pointed out to me privately, the large majority of kids that go in the first round actually really aren't ready for the NBA. They're drafting them on their potential. There's only a handful of guys that get up there and just kind of light it up, if you will, at that level. The rest of them, they're drafting them on who they're going to be. And I think that there's enough NBA scouts based on who's walked into the arena doors this year, both home and away, to watch him, that there are plenty of teams that think he is going to be a very good basketball player at that level. So while you can argue there are things that he needs to work on, and maybe he's not NBA ready right now, I don't think that the scouts see it the way that some of the fans do.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the scouts kind of look at the potential of what a guy could be in the pros. And, I think this year teams have really just, especially here lately, teams are saying, okay, we're not going to let Colin Murray Boyles beat us. We're going to give him all the attention. We're going to double team him and make somebody else beat us. And I think that's kind of, maybe hurt Colin a little bit just because of all the attention he does get in the paint. But you've seen some of the games where he's gone up against the best players in the country and really thrived and showed how he could be a potential lottery pick. I mean, think about how he played against Auburn. I mean, he was the reason South Carolina had a chance to win that game. So I mean, he's shown that he's got all the potential in the world. And you saw it last year as a freshman, and I think he had a bright future in the NBA. And I think he's shown with all the attention that he's been getting from defensive from the post, like he still is scoring a lot of points and showing a lot of potential.
Pardon me. We talked to Derek last week, and Derek said that the coaches were pressing Colin in the recent weeks. You got to shoot more. Like you're an unselfish kid, which is great, but you need to be a little bit more selfish. And now in the last two games, I just pulled his numbers here. Of course, both losses, A&M and Kentucky. 29 field goal attempts, 16 of those went into the basket. He did fire 3 3-pointers combined in those two games. He hit one, 15 rebounds. I mean, 36 points. I mean, he's a pretty complete player. But this would be 2 out of 3 years where they've had a lottery pick. If he is one, I think he will be one. They've had a lottery pick, but the team really just wasn't that good. And then you go back to last season, and that wasn't here. I mean, obviously Colin was, but he was just a freshman. And they had an outstanding season, of course, led by older players, Talon Cooper, BJ Mack, so on and so forth. Do you draw anything from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows you need more than one really good player. I mean, think about some of these past teams, like you mentioned, the first year in Lamont Paris and Gigi Jackson. Think about some of these other teams around the SEC. Think about when Georgia had Anthony Edwards. I mean, he's really good, but they struggled throughout the season. You look back to last season for South Carolina, they had just a lot of different. They had really good players at all the different positions, and they all worked well together. And I think that's one of the things that made that team work so well. And this year is just they struggle to get some certain guys going. And I think again that kind of has led to where the whole focus of a defensive game plan for a team is on Colin Murray Bulls. So I think it just limits some of what he can do, even though he still had his success. But I think it just shows that you got to continue to put guys around these guys. And I think year 2 for Lamont last year was kind of the blueprint for how this thing can work for South Carolina. I mean, you brought in guys like a Talon Cooper, Michi Johnson within his 3rd year from the transfer portal and really shined. BJ Mack came back, stayed in state coming from Wofford and could have gone anywhere, but stayed in state and was one of the key factors to lead that team to the NCAA tournament and finish second in the SEC. So, I think if South Carolina can find a way to build around that blueprint of what worked in that year 2, things can get back on track for South Carolina.
I hope so. Kind of reminds you a little bit of when Anthony Edwards was at Georgia. Georgia and South Carolina really are similar basketball programs. If you think about it, they've been able to sign some really good players, but the consistency. I mean, it's the same thing right now. It's the same thing. I know Coach Paris is working really hard, very respected, by the way. I've spoken with multiple coaches who really, really, really like Lamont Paris and want their kids to play for him. But right now we're still in the same old with Gamecock basketball, the ups and the downs. I'm not. It is human nature to compare present coaches to former coaches. So I guess in a way I'm doing that, but also not really, because the times have changed with the portal and the wide open doors of NIL. So, the past could have been much different than it was. But I got to say, Alex, it fell on deaf ears, but the consistency of Frank Martin, whether you liked him or didn't like him, and whether that consistency was at the level in which people thought it could be, like, that was the most consistent the program had been since Frank McGuire, as far as just not falling off a cliff every other year. I mean, they were always, they were kind of always in the mix. I mean, they had the one big breakthrough year and they didn't have any others, where they got to the dance, but they were kind of always there battling, winning 16, 17, 18, 19 games a year. I'm not saying it was good enough, but when you look at the history of Carolina basketball and you see this is a lot of what that's been, do you think that people maybe in some small way, shape, or form appreciate a little bit more what Frank did in his tenure?
Yeah, I think after the Final Four season with Frank Martin, I think the biggest thing was that one, you didn't. I think some felt like they didn't capitalize enough off of the Final Four run, but then you just being so close to the NCAA tournament, but then having those non-conference losses that really, you think about the Stetson loss or the Boston University loss, that really, when South Carolina was playing well towards the end of those years, they couldn't get over those losses. And I think that's kind of the next step for Lamont Paris is one, after kind of seeing if they can find a way to rebuild, what they had last year, being able to sustain it. And I think, that's something that in the history of South Carolina basketball, that's kind of the big question is, can you sustain success? And I think that's kind of the next step for Lamont Paris, so they can get this thing back on track next season.
All right. I'll admit this. I did not get a chance to listen to Aaron Lucas with you and Matt last week. And for those that didn't, pull up the Chief Sports app and you can go do that. What was Aaron saying about this year?
Just kind of what everybody else is saying is just, some of the struggles that have been with South Carolina. And I think it's just one of those things where some guys just and this is just me talking here, just some guys just haven't stepped up, or they just need some more guys to step up, and some guys just haven't gotten to that point. And, I think, one of the things that, it's kind of been talked about with this whole season is just, when you look at this season, they had so many close losses, and it's just, if they had 2 or 3 of those early wins, or 2 or 3 of those wins or losses where they could have had a win, I think that kind of turns the season around. But this year, it's just they haven't been able to get over the hump, and I think this has kind of been the story of the season, is they've been right there on the verge at a lot of times. And obviously, it started off bad with the North Florida loss, but they've been so close in so many games, and they just haven't been able to get over that hump.
We'll have to pull off a big upset to get over it tomorrow. Ole Miss will be in town at 7 o'clock at the CLA. On Friday, Alex, Gamecock baseball gets underway. The first year of Paul Maneri over at Founders Park is going to be a big weekend. Friday or Saturday's looking better, by the way, from a weather standpoint. Yeah. Sunday's not, but Saturday certainly is looking better. As over, shoot, I think it's over 200 now. Somewhere between 200 and 300 former players and their families will be here to honor Coach Tanner. Quick programming note: we will have Coach Tanner. He'll be sitting with me in the box on Friday, and he will be on at noon. So we'll talk to him about a lot of stuff, and I think he plans to stick around for a little while. So looking forward to having Coach up there. What are you most excited about this weekend, this new era of Carolina baseball?
For one, I'm interested to see the pitching staff that's been put together. Obviously, I think the question with the pitching staff is what do those 1, 2, and 3, those weekend starters look like? But I remember when we were sitting there talking to these guys at media day. Each one of the guys, or the pitchers that we talked about the depth of the pitching staff. You think about just it from the starters to the bullpen. They think they have some serious depth on this team, and that's something that you got to have in the SEC, as we all know. And it's going to be interesting to see how the starters look. Obviously, with SQ getting the ball in game 1, really interested to see what he looks like. And then you got Matthew Becker and getting game 2 start. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the starting pitching looks like. Obviously, just from a fielding standpoint, that's something that's kind of struggled with last year throughout the year, just trying to see how they've cleaned up those errors and seeing some of the new guys that are out there too. So either be it transfers or freshmen, seeing how those guys perform. And the one position I'm kind of eager to see too is catcher position. Obviously got big shoes to fill with Cole Messina gone, but you see guys like Talmadge, Lee Corey, how those guys kind of backed up that potential.
Cole Messina will also join us on Friday up in the booth. I'm looking forward to seeing Cole. Yeah, the catcher position is the one that I am most. Of course, I was a catcher, so I'm a little biased, but I am certainly focused on that. I mean, Alex, I like this staff. I really do. I like this staff, and I think that Coach Maneri and Coach Rooney have a really great mindset. Can we get 5 and 6 innings out of our starters? Because they do like where they are from a bullpen standpoint. It's not going to be great every night. It's never great every night with anybody. You're always going to have some rough moments here or there. But Jake McCoy is going to get this start on Sunday. I kind of mentioned that yesterday. I think Coach firmed it up last night or something like that. So it's not often around here that 2 lefties are in the weekend rotation. It's actually been pretty rare, to be honest. And so SQ going on Friday and then back-to-back lefties, Becker and McCoy on Saturday and Sunday. I know that they will kind of evaluate after each weekend and see where they are. I'll be anxious to see if that's something that sticks or if they think it's better, if Becker's throwing the way that I think he's going to throw this year or Jake McCoy, whether they end up going left, right, left, or something like that. It'll be interesting to see, but the pieces are there.
Yeah, and I think the one key or interesting piece is Eli Jersenbeck. Now, I think I was on here last week and we are both talking who's going to get that number 1 start, and I think we both said Eli Jersenbeck at the time, but it's had a little bit of a struggle in the fall, and obviously we all know the potential that he has in the stuff. I mean, I think Maneri kind of mentioned that in media day, just talking about how good his stuff is, and it's just been a little bit of a struggle in the fall, but maybe in the long run it ends up being a good thing for South Carolina. I think you have to imagine he gets himself back to who he is and can be one of those number 1 starters. And then if you have 3 other guys who show they can be starters this weekend, that's only going to help South Carolina because you need a deep pitching staff in the SEC. And so maybe it ends up being a good thing in the long run for South Carolina if Jersenbeck can get back to who he was, and then you have more proven starters who've gotten some experience early on.
Eli's got great stuff. He's got to get it together. He can help this team. He can help himself make a lot of money if he can go have a big year under Coach Maneri. Alex, we'll let you run on that note, my man. We got to get to John here in just a second, but by the time we talk again, they will have already played 3. They'll be about to play their 4th game of the season. Carolina baseball will, and we'll certainly recap it then. Have a wonderful week, brother.
Same to y'all. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you. There you go. Alex Jones with the BigSpur.com.